speak to other Sri Lankan who lives here, or even speak to the people back home, I think perhaps speaking as a layperson, that might give us a little bit more understanding how to approach them. So I like to tell you three stories, or three things that I kind of came across when I went to Sri Lanka. I've been living here since I was sort of 13, and over the last few years I have been to Sri Lanka regularly. What I've seen over the years is the technology, IT technology, things improve, and you actually even start to see like these fancy sport cars that you see in these Western countries, rarely see in these countries as well. And you wonder, okay, is Sri Lanka actually improving? And when you look at the same time, the homeless numbers are increasing, and the poverty also increasing, which makes me wonder the disparity between the rich and the poor is getting worse and worse. And so, an example, one of the stories, when I visited Sri Lanka several years ago, we were going to visit some relatives, and we were having our lunch. We near I don't know if anyone knows Kantale Lake. We decided to sit there and have our lunch. We were prepared before. And we had a little bit too much, and the leftover we decided to give to stray dogs. And when we were doing this, we were approached by this old lady and said, can you please stop giving the food to the dogs, and can we please have this? This is the level of poverty. I was so shocked. Sometimes we know there's poverty in Sri Lanka, and we know it, but until it's on your face, you don't really feel it. And I was so shocked to hear that this lady is begging for food that we were giving to the dogs, to the animals. So that's the level of poverty that we see in Sri Lanka. And it's sad, and I'm so embarrassed and upset as a Sri Lankan to experience that. And then later on, second story, we held by NIO here, we held a women empowerment event. And part of the research we did when I went to Sri Lanka, I went to up north, northeast area, and came across this Tamil lady who's a midwife. And she was saying, I think Suresh mentioned about the drugs and alcohol, and the women are really struggling there because the men are addicted to every drug under the sun, and domestic violence, sexual abuse is going up, and the families are really struggling. And we saw in the last government, I think you used to hear about alcoholism in Sri Lanka, but you don't really hear much about drug use. And I think it was mainly, this is just by observing what I see, in the last government, people start to talk about drugs. And now when you go to Sri Lanka, you hear near the schools, like the parents are so scared because the drug dealers are hanging around schools, and you even see it in very rural villages. People are youngsters are using drugs quite regularly. So this is the deterioration you see. And also, part of this NIO Women Empowerment thing, I actually went to Tea State. And the local was saying, you will find about 1,600 people living in this area, particular area. So we went there. When we went there, you only see about let's say five houses, even Sri Lankan standard, like 5 houses. And I didn't believe there would be 1,600 people living in that sort of little space. And when we got there, people start to gather. And I was shocked to see the level of living conditions. There's animals, waste, and people eating and drinking, and the way they clothe, the level of housing, and the living conditions are dire. So it doesn't matter whether you're Sinhalese or a Muslim or a Tamil. Everyone at poverty level, your average Sri Lankan is struggling. Might be different struggles, but they're all struggling. Last story, I won't take up too much time, is one of my friends who's a foreigner visited Sri Lanka. And he was walking on the beach in Sri Lanka, and he was approached by a Sri Lankan man and said, would you like some drugs? And my friend kindly declined. And then he said, would you like some nice Sri Lankan ladies? And he kindly declined. Yes, this is a true story. And then I thought he will stop there. And then he said, would you like some nice young Sri Lankan boys? And I never heard of this. And I was so embarrassed to be a Sri Lankan then, for my friend to say that this is the level of disgusting level that Sri Lanka has fallen to. So, you know, I'm part of NIO here, and if anyone is, you know, that's why I am asking to speak to your family members, your relatives, whoever you know back home, why we should vote for Anura Kumara and why we should back NPP, because the last two governments, the other two parties, they've been around for 70 years and they have not progressed. They haven't done anything for this country. We are going down the drain, and I think sometimes. You know, and the other way is, they try to divide us. I think Suresh and also Darshan uncle mentioned that, you know, they are trying to divide us. When you speak to your lay Sinhalese person, they are, since I think the April attack, they become more and more racist. And this is fueled by the Gotabaya party. And I think the other party, the UNP, is approaching the minorities and creating fear among them. At the end of the day, we all have the same problem. We are all Sri Lankan, and I think that's what they're trying to segregate us. When you are in Sri Lanka, kind of like there's a Sri Lankan saying, I think, you feel like a frog in a well, basically. And this is created by the people in power. It's not because that they don't want to learn, they don't want to know beyond what's happening in front of them. Because when you're there, all the media, everything is controlled by the people in power, people with money, and you don't see what's happening even outside the country. So I think it's us to sort of let them know what's happening and perhaps give them the message and the information. So, when you speak to them, tell them that this is something different. Give something new a chance, because they probably say, oh yeah, it's best to go with the devil that you know, but you know it's a devil. So let's go with something new and something different, and let's vote for AKD. And the other thing is, then he's not alone. There are 28 other groups from different religions and different ethnicities and different unions together backing him. So he's not going to be like a dictator. He will be under the control of these people. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Janitha. That was a very touching speech. Dr. Janitha spoke to us as a layperson, her life experience, or not real life experience, while she was in Sri Lanka or visiting Sri Lanka. So she highlighted the poverty in Sri Lanka, disparity between the rich and the poor, drug abuse, like Dr. Suresh highlighted, poor living conditions, also the class struggle. This all leads to the class